Okay, we're going to try this again. Hey there, guys. Nothing like a good repeat. Practice makes perfect. This is Dr. Argie of the Ask Dr. Argie Courageous Conversations Connect series, and this is Mindful Mondays. We bring you good topics that are trending every Monday night on Mindful Mondays, and I am the founder and CEO of Faith Inc. that stands for Family and Individual Therapeutic Healing, and co-founder and CEO of Connections Matter LLC with my husband, Morgan E. Wilson Jr. So I thought we needed to start that all over again a little bit because we tried and it booted us out and froze us and all of that. So you guys that were on, hop back on for me. For those that weren't on, this is perfect timing because we're just kind of repeating it. It's like a movie that you watch over again and you try to do it and get it right. So I, just if you're hopping on, just make sure that you STLC for me, share, tag, like, and comment so that other people can hear this conversation, even if it's not in real time. But since we got on later and then now we are actually repeating the technical difficulties, I know something's going on with Facebook. So what I'd love for you all to do is give some calls to your friends and have them hop on this conversation as well. We ultimately believe that courageous conversations connect. So this is an opportunity for us to speak truth, trust, and transparency that ultimately leads to transformational breakthroughs. And so this courageous conversation tonight, in particular, we have a monthly topic. Our monthly topic is transitions that change our lives permanently. Anybody ever had a transition out there that's changed your life permanently? And tonight, Mindful Mondays, we're talking about what to do in the aftermath of divorce, death, and possible disaster. Hey, Karen, you hop back on. Thanks for joining again. Please let me know if it's freezing again so that I feel like, so I'm not talking to the atmosphere here. Although sometimes I do talk to the atmosphere and, sometimes it talks back. We never know. And I've definitely talked to Jesus. I have my conversation with the divine and my source, and that kind of guides me. So we had said earlier, and for those of you who are just hopping on right now, it's perfect timing. Give me a thumbs up or smiling faces if you're just hopping on. Please share this information. I like to say STLC, share, tag, like, and comment. We're talking about life's transitions. What do you do in the aftermath of divorce? What do you do in the aftermath of death? What do you do in the aftermath of a disaster, whatever the disaster is? A natural disaster, a job loss, a breakup, someone becomes terminally ill, and that feels like a disaster. It feels like the worst thing in the world ever. I encourage everybody to journal. That's always one thing that I want to go to because I feel like that alleviates the pressure that's on the inside. And we often say here, the pressure bursts pipes. Pressure does make diamonds too, but it has to be the right amount of pressure, and it has to be able to emit in the right timing in order to create the right level of pressure. But if it's too much pressure in that pipe, then that pipe will either explode or implode. And that's very much like us. And in some ways, that's probably what happened. We're talking about hot topics with the shooting that took place in Virginia Beach. I don't know the gentleman. A lot of times these mass shootings happen with white people, many white people, not all white people. But in this case, this was a black man who went into the municipal building after working there for 15 years as an engineer and just shot, it seems like, the first persons that he actually saw. Can you imagine? That's what I mean by a disaster, that you wake up clothed in your right mind, as they say, and you're expecting to do your daily rituals, hopefully your prayer, your meditation, cover yourself before you walk out the door. Hopefully you take a shower, you do something like, bathe, brush your teeth, all those kind of rituals that we do every day. And then you make it on your way. You're going to run errands, or you're going to a workplace, you're sending your kids to school. Hopefully you're expecting that everyone will return home safely, right? Because you assume that we're not on the front lines of a war. So you assume that you're going to get in your car or get on the bus or get on the train and go and do the work that you've been called to do for that day. And then you're going to come back to your homestead and that hopefully the people that you love, who you live with, or the people that you love that live in other places, that they will return home. But guess what? We live in a dark and dangerous world where that is not always the case, and where sometimes people are in so much distress, so much pain, so much hurt, so much turmoil, sometimes inner and external turmoil, that they hurt other people. You all have heard that saying, hurt people hurt people. Well, that's real. And in this particular case, for whatever reason, this gentleman made a decision, maybe not in his right mind, to hurt all of these people. And what I always go to, and you all tell me whether you thought this or not, I always go to, well, one, what was going on in his mind that he thought like, okay, if this is going to be how I'm going to end, this is how I want to end it. I want to take some other people out with me. And two, who hurt him? Because hurt people do hurt people. And so we all ought to be real careful about how we treat people anywhere, quite frankly, but especially in the workplace, because we're going to these places every single day, right? We're sometimes spending the majority of the time that we have as an awake time at these places. And it sometimes can be daunting and extremely stressful on these jobs. And so if you are in a position of power, it should be a position of power that you take seriously to do good, not to do wrong and to do evil. Babe, can you open that door? I'm feeling a little hot in here. We probably should have put the fan on or the air. So in this particular case, and I don't know if you all have ever experienced someone close to you. Hey, Arnold, thanks for joining the show. Hey, Lisa, thanks for hopping back on. I don't know if you all have ever been in a situation where you have lost someone close to you suddenly. But there is a distinction sometimes when you're dealing with death. So I'm thinking about these 15 people at this municipal building in Virginia Beach, and how they went to work expecting to return home, how their husbands or their wives or their children or their parents or their loved ones, how they said, maybe had a conversation with them and expected that they would have another conversation with them. And it ended up being the last conversation that they had with them, and how distressing that must be even in the now. So this is what I mean by the aftermath. Thinking about if you've ever lost someone suddenly and you didn't anticipate that, the roller coaster ride, quite frankly, that it may send many of us on, that we now have to deal with and reconcile that we no longer have this person in our lives anymore. And then what do we do? How do we even cope with that? There is sort of a debate when we're thinking about transitions and I want you guys to please share if you feel comfortable, if you've ever had a transition that has changed your life permanently. What is that? All month, we're talking about transitions, different kinds of transitions. So if you ever had a transition that changed your life permanently, please share. Hey, Tom, thanks for joining the show. We're talking about transitions tonight. And you guys let me know, give me a thumbs up, smiley face, or hearts if I'm still on, if we're still rolling, because they kicked us off or we froze us out, Facebook or something, and we had to hop off and hop back on. But if you've ever had a life, interestingly, Tom just hopped on and Morgan and I were involved in one of he and Freedom, his lovely wife's play called Breakthrough, and it was about a lot of transitions in that play. And it was basically art imitating life. Well, we're talking about the real, and Morgan, thank you, babe. He just turned on the fan, so because I was having a little hot flash in here. So it was, you said TMI. It was really hot in here. So yeah, we're transparent. We're transparent in here. If you've ever had an experience where you had a significant loss and it happened quickly, whether it was a death or whether it was a divorce or whether it was a change, maybe even it was a job loss, whatever it was, that can send you on, like, again, a roller coaster ride. Now, for many people who have been caregivers or caretakers of someone who's had a long-term illness, they might beg to differ. And I've had both experiences happen with me. I've had, unfortunately, a lot of loss through death. And some people, it was a long-term illness, like my mother. And for 3 years she was ill, but we enjoyed those additional 3 years that we had. And then I had an uncle, and I had a very close girlfriend and a very close male friend. You all know I've been very transparent about one of my very dearest friends, Monique Purnell, who passed away last August, and we were just vacationing, and that was so sudden, and it almost doesn't feel real now. As well as my very dear friend, Reverend James Jackson, who passed away very suddenly a month ago, or it's about a month ago, right about now. And that was very sudden, and it almost doesn't feel real. So the aftermath of these transitions sometimes can cause us to not understand, cause us to have questions. It can cause us not to be prepared, quite frankly. And certainly in the aftermath, we may not always be significantly ready, if you will. Hey, Janelle, thanks for joining the show. She says that is a form of post-traumatic stress. Each time I return from deployment, I experience PTSD. Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more, because I don't know if everybody understands what post-traumatic stress actually is, right? And again, deployment, if you're talking about being in the service, thank you for your service, because I don't ever engage with someone who has been a part of our military without thanking them for their service, because it is because of you that we are able to have the freedoms that we have, that we're able to sit in our offices, in our homes, and go traveling wherever, and feel that there is someone standing watch to make sure that we are safe as we possibly can be. So I don't take that lightly. Anthony is on. Hey, Anthony Wilson, thanks for joining. Deidre is back on. Thanks for joining the show. Tiffany's on. Hey, Tiffany, thanks for joining the show. I got to give you a call so we can touch base. Donovan's on. Hey, Donovan, thanks for joining the show. Janelle says Army combat. Yes, thank you. Oh my goodness. God bless you. And thank you again so much for doing your due diligence to protect all of us. That is a calling. It's not my calling, but it's certainly a calling for anybody who makes a decision to join the military and to protect us and give us the safety. And by the way, and you might want to speak on this, Janelle, in this conversation, when you talk about transitions that change our lives permanently, for any persons that have been in the military, re-entering after the military is a transition, right? Because we're all entering systems all the time and exiting systems. Most of us are experiencing some level of entering and some level of exiting on a regular basis. And we tend not to be prepared sometimes for those entrances and those exits. Subsequently, often that lack of preparation can leave us ill-equipped, can leave us feeling distracted or uncomfortable. And of course, as Janelle talks about, the post-traumatic stress disorder is real. So there are many persons in our military that go back to their families, and they're returning very different than they left. And they're sort of the whole family system now has to adjust to this new norm that extensively will change their lives permanently. For those men and women, and for their families, we just celebrated Veterans Day, a Memorial Day, which is to celebrate our veterans. And there really shouldn't just be one day to celebrate that. There should be every single day that we celebrate our veterans who put their lives on the line for us, and not just when they're in active duty, but before, in their preparation for it, and then after, when they're home again with their families, who, by the way, sacrifice for us as well. And when it comes to post-traumatic stress disorder, I don't know how many of you all know that that incorporates delusions and sometimes hallucinations and panic and a level of distress and anxiety that many people are riddled with, oftentimes reimagining the things that they've experienced that the mind really is not equipped to deal with. And it is stressful. That's why they call it post traumatic stress disorder because they're experiencing the trauma over and over again that is creating distress. And then I've coined the continual traumatic stress disorder because for a lot of our veterans who come back home, they then continue to experience stressors and trauma based on both their previous experience and based on not really getting their needs met when they actually do come home. Let's say Janelle said a roller coaster, absolutely, and that you prepare but can never prepare enough. Many highs and lows, but the families have to deal with us too. Absolutely, Janelle, you're so right. And then Tom talked about divorce with children is the highest trauma. We're going to talk about that in a minute too, because I think that is really, really important. Let's talk about, and for those of you who are just hopping on, just know that this is the Ask Dr. Argie Courageous Conversations Connect series. And that I asked you to just do one thing for me, share. We like to say STLC, share, tag, like, and comment. And hop on, call somebody, text them, let them know that we're on this conversation. We started a little bit late. We're going to do that in the summer just so that everybody can get to experience this conversation. What we like to say is a courageous conversation connects. It doesn't disconnect. And it's important for us to have these conversations. So back to what Janelle was saying about the transition. Hey, Marcos just joined the show. Thanks for joining, Marcos. What Janelle was talking about, which is that the family sacrifice too. We're talking about not just veterans, but we're having a sort of a specific conversation right now about transitions that change our lives. And we've sort of gone down the path of what happens for the military, our military brothers and sisters who go away and try to prepare as best they can, but never really can fully prepare for what they have to experience, and then return home to their families who have also sacrificed by not having them there. The wives, the husbands, the children, the grandparents, the siblings, the friends, that have to deal with that person that's no longer here, and then have to deal with, quite frankly, what will happen for that person and that family system when their loved one returns, and they return with a different set of needs, quite frankly. When they return and their lives have been changed in such a way permanently that they're dealing with that post-traumatic stress disorder, that they can't adapt to the civilian community in the way that they were a part of before. And sometimes they're not as aware that they're so different, right? And so that other people within the military realm understand what they're going through, but they may not fully get a full grasp of what's going on, and certainly their family members and friends don't fully understand what they're going through. So that is a transition, right? Now, here's the deal. There is nothing constant but change. We are all dealing with transitions every single day. Many of us are either in the middle of a storm, just exiting a storm, or about to enter a storm. There is nothing constant but change, and if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so what typically happens is that we spend a lot of time trying to push away from the imminent change that we're experiencing, right? And when you rub up against resistance, oftentimes that creates more drama and more trauma in your life. Those transitions happen sometimes for a reason. And oftentimes, like Janelle said, either we're not really, really prepared, or we haven't talked about it and adapted to or developed the coping mechanisms nor the resources that we need to really weather that particular storm. And I think before we got cut off, one of the things that I was saying was that I had a friend who has lupus, and she works out every day, and she's up at 4 a.m. Every time I see her, she says that she's tired, but she has much more endurance and due diligence than I do when it comes to working out. And so when we had this conversation, I said, do you really like working out 4 o'clock in the morning? And she said, no, I don't really like working out 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, well, why do you do it? And she said, I work out every day to build up my body, not for the here and now. I work out to build up my body so when the storm does come, so when the curveball does happen, so when something does take place, that I am equipped and prepared, that my body is built up to withstand and weather the pounding and weather that storm. And I thought, wow, that is a metaphor for life, because how many of us kind of traverse the world, then navigate our communities without a care in the world, sort of acting like nothing is ever going to jump off. We're never going to get sick. We're never going to have a divorce. We're never going to have a loss. Nobody's going to die. Everybody we love is coming with us. And then when we transition, everybody that we love is transitioning with us. And that's just not how it works. And so I really loved what she had to say. And I thought to myself, how many of us really fully prepare our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, because it's all connected. We're actually not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And while we're having that human experience, guess what? We're vulnerable to the external and the internal elements that can actually be disruptive and destructive. Disruptive and destructive. And they actually can be weapons of mass distraction that can harm us. And in that situation with the gentleman at Virginia Beach, you know, whatever he was going through, he was hurt and in distress. I believe that. And I believe that hurt people. And so he set out that particular day, unbeknownst to the people who became his victims, to hurt someone else because he was hurting. So I ask you the question, how many of us often pay attention to the people that are actually hurting? How many of us reach out to someone who looks distressed and say, how are you? A simple, how are you doing? Reaching out to a senior person, reaching out to a young person, reaching out to somebody that you know may be depressed. Because here's the deal. We have social media available to us. And what happens sometimes is we spend so much time in the social media platforms that we forget that there's the human touch and the human kindness and connection that actually keeps us connected, quite frankly. And sometimes it prevents us from doing something harmful to someone else. Let's see. So Hazel Ann's on. Hey, Hazel. Thanks for joining. And I think I said that correctly. Tell me if I said it wrong. Hazel Ann. All right. Thanks for joining the show. Belva, Mother Waller, thanks for joining the show. I appreciate you always. And congratulations for being a new grandmommy. I know you're having a good time with a great grandmommy. So tell me what they're going to be calling you. Is it great grandmom? I'm not sure. But it must be an exciting time. So I'm excited for all of you, the whole Waller family. Mikal is on. So I think this is a good time, since a few more people are hopping on, is to just share what our theme for this month, and give me some thumbs up or some smiley faces or some hearts if you like this theme. Our theme is transitions that change our lives permanently. Transitions that change our lives permanently. That's good transitions, that's bad transitions, that's in between transitions, but many of us are going through transitions. And those transitions have the propensity, the probability to change our lives permanently in ways that we can't even imagine. Sometimes in great ways. Sometimes, I'd love to win the lottery. That would be a great transition, right? However, what happens is a lot of people tell you they get this influx of money, this windfall, and then now they're worried about everybody stealing their money. So there can be good things that happen that change our lives permanently as well, that are not necessarily good in the aftermath. And what we're talking about is the aftermath, because whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, the aftermath is where you get into the nitty gritty, right? They say the devil's in the details, right? It's in the aftermath. It's not when that great thing happened. Let's say, we'll talk about this because it's wedding season, when he popped the question or she popped the question, right? And everybody's all excited. And then, interesting enough, in therapy, I start hearing all the drama that starts happening when somebody's mad because they didn't get invited to the wedding, or they can't invite everyone, or, some bridesmaid doesn't want to be in it, or is causing more drama. So, there are good things that happen that create some drama, and then there are bad things. Like, it's very interesting, and I don't know if you all have experienced this, but I find in the therapeutic work that I've done all these years, that people like to plan the wedding, but they don't necessarily plan the marriage. I want to say that again because I feel like that's a drop the mic kind of moment. People like to plan the wedding, the cake, the flowers, the colors, the pomp and circumstance, the rituals, and that's all wonderful. The reception, it's beautiful. But if you don't plan the marriage, then you won't be prepared for what's to come when the roller coasters do happen. When somebody does, like Janelle says, go into the service, and like she said, people don't want to necessarily get involved because they don't know what's going to happen once that person comes back, right? Or if you do get a divorce, right? People don't go down the aisle and say, I do, because they want to get a divorce. They intend on you being their forever person. But stuff happens. As I said earlier, I did use a little profanity, which is not my thing, but usually, but I feel like it's an appropriate word to use when talking about this topic. So what I said, if you all weren't on, is shit happens. It happens, right? Close the ears for the babies if they're listening. It does happen. And when it happens, the question is, are you ready? And I'm not saying, are you completely ready? Because none of us are ever completely ready for somebody that we love to die. None of us are completely ready for to have a divorce, even if we feel like the person we married was a jerk, but that wasn't what the intention was when we walked down that aisle. None of us are completely ready to lose our jobs and not have enough money to pay our bills or have more month than money. None of us are completely ready to hear the big C. You have cancer, or someone you love is chronically or terminally ill. All of those are curveballs that we're not completely ready for. Hey, Angel, thanks for joining the show. Basil, thanks for hopping back on. Janelle says, when the dust settles, when the adrenaline rush fizzles out. Yes, when the dust settles, right, in the aftermath. Mikhail talks about senior parent care. Yeah. That's a good one. And Celeste is on, so we'll talk a little bit about that whole senior parent care, because that's a big one. I started, before we got popped off, to talk a little bit about my experience. And hey, Rich, he's on. Thanks for joining the show. A little bit of my experience. And there was some hot topics, so I'll just recap the hot topics before I go into that experience. Not only was it the Virginia shooting, but there were the tornadoes that happened last week. And I hope that everyone survived those tornadoes, but sometimes people don't survive and they come out of nowhere. And in our community, it's sort of our region, we don't have a whole lot of natural disasters, but in other places there are fires, not there, what do you call they? Wildfires. Like in California, there are earthquakes, a lot of in California and in the western part of our country. There are tornadoes and hurricanes. Well, we experience a little bit of that here. Sometimes there are flash floods. Interestingly enough, and I don't know if I've told this story on this particular platform, this show before, but I don't know if you all remember the tsunami that happened. It was maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. I can't remember how long, but it stuck with me, this particular tsunami, because it was during the holiday season, and it was during the throughout the coast of Africa and Asia. And there were a lot of people at these resorts, and very wealthy people, I might add, at various resorts celebrating the holiday season. And the tsunami hit. And what was fascinating was it was horrible that all these people died. But what was fascinating about it is that they found no carcasses. No animal carcasses, that is. They found none. And I always thought that was a fascinating fact, because while we as humans were laying out on the beach and having a great time, which is of course what you're supposed to do when you're on vacation, right? But we were completely unaware and not paying attention to the rumblings underneath the earth during that period of time. What they tell you about tsunamis is that tsunamis are building sometimes for days, weeks, maybe even months. It's a buildup, and it's deep under the recesses of the earth that these tsunamis are building up. And so when that wall of water begins to hit the earth, there have been all of these warning signs, the shore, right? There's all these warning signs that have been kicking off for a long time to come. And guess who were paying attention to the warning signs? The animals. who sought higher ground. The birds, the dogs, all the animals, they sought higher ground because they felt that something was about to happen in the atmosphere. So I've always thought about that from the perspective of our atmosphere, the human beings, because we are the highest species, right? But what happens, give me some thumbs up, smiley faces, hearts, or whatever your emotion is. How many of us, and I want to ask this question to those that are still on, how many of you, right, have not been prepared because you weren't paying attention to the atmosphere, the relationship that you were in, the job, right? There's this book, if you haven't read it, you should read it, called Who Moved My Cheese? It's by Spencer, I believe, and it's an older book. I'm getting some thumbs up and smiles, right? There's this book called Who Moved My Cheese? It's a great book that many people used to read. It was like a 20-year-old book, but you can read it in like 2 hours. And it's all about how we're unprepared for what's happening in our atmosphere. And I would ask you a question, if you've never read the book, or if you've read the book, tell me that you've read the book. Are you Sniff and Scurry, or are you Him and Haw? Those were the characters in Who Moved My Cheese. And they were little mice, right? And they named them Him and Haw and Sniff and Scurry for a reason. Because Sniff and Scurry felt like their cheese was about to be moved, and they started figuring out, what are we going to do about this change? What are we going to do about this transition? What are we going to do in the aftermath? We got to figure this out. We got to, do some strategic planning. But Him and Haw, they're like, nothing's ever going to happen to us, and if this cheese gets moved, we'll just stay here until the cheese comes back. Which character does this remind you of you? In either way, does it remind you of someone that you know, right? In the metaphor that I used about the tsunami, I really wanted to drive home the point that if we are not paying attention to what's going on in our atmosphere, it can knock us off our square. And oftentimes those transitions that impact us permanently are the transitions that happen where we are clueless. We're aloof, we're obtuse, and we have no idea that that curveball is going to be like a bat knocking us upside the head, because we're just oblivious to what's going on in our environment, right? And so I encourage us all to pay attention. Pay attention to your relationships. Pay attention to what's happening in the workplace. Pay attention to what's happening in our community. I was at church on Sunday, by the way, and our pastor at Enon, Pastor Waller, and Mother Waller's on, I hope she's still on, he talked about the fact that we just had, a couple of weeks ago, we had to vote. And our community of people of color, almost about 10% showed up to vote. That's a problem.
And Tom had some great comments on the earlier, Tom Cook, about voter
participation.
He and I had some conversations.
Yeah, I mean, come on, guys. Like, that's a problem. I understand that sometimes we feel like there is no hope, right? And sometimes we feel an emotion of despair, and we feel like nobody's out there looking out for us. But if we don't vote, if we don't, try to figure out how to get involved and get engaged in our system, in our community, then what happens is other people then start making decisions for us. And the decisions that they make for us are not going to be in our best interest. They're going to be in the interest of other people. Akiva is on. I hope I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not saying it correctly. Angela's on. Thanks for joining the show. Angela, I definitely wasn't ready when I got the call that my son died. Worst day of my life. I'm so sorry to hear that, Angel, and both my thoughts and my prayers go out to you, sending light and love your way. I do understand in many ways that those of us who experience loss, no matter who it is, that no one can fully understand exactly what we're going through in that moment. Because quite frankly, as I've said before, death is the most public and private thing that any of us can go through. Why? Because it's public, because if you live long enough, you're going to lose somebody that you love. It's private because nobody has the same relationship that you have with that person. And one of the hardest things I can only imagine is to lose a child or I've lost a parent, but I don't know what it's like to lose a child. And so what I do know is that it's a bit of a roller coaster ride, and that we all have to go through the processes of grief. And this is what I mean by the aftermath, and being not necessarily fully prepared, but at least open to a conversation about how you begin the process of dealing with those kinds of transitions, like the loss of a child, like the loss of a loved one, like the loss of a parent, quite frankly. Perhaps it's the loss of a job. Perhaps it's loss of the way in which, and Tom Cook just mentioned this a little bit earlier, the way in which you defined your family system, and now you've embarked on a divorce. You know that that's perhaps the right thing to do because for whatever reason, it's not working out. And children will often tell me they'd rather be from a broken home than living in one. And what that means, quite frankly, is that it's more painful for them to watch their parents hating on each other and not getting along and arguing than if they were to move on and divorce and perhaps find love somewhere else. But that presents a whole set of other issues with regards to a blended family. Because quite frankly, then if you do move on and partner with someone else, you've now made that decision, but your children didn't make the decision, right? And so now they've got to adapt to a decision that was never made by them. And hopefully you've kept them in mind, but they can't make that decision for you. And so subsequently, that change is hard to adapt to. Rashida's on. Hey, Rashida, thanks for joining the show. Speaking of transition and change and adaptation, here is 5 points that I believe are necessary for change to grow through, not to go through, but to grow through change in different ways. So there's the stages of grief. Everybody knows the stages of grief typically, but in case you don't, there is anger sometimes when change hits, where transition hits, that you have to wrestle with and reconcile. There is bargaining. You know, when somebody dies, sometimes people will say they're bargaining with God. You know, I will never do this again if you bring this person back, right? Then there's depression, right? There's sort of, I just don't want to get up. I experienced that. As I was transparent with you all when my mother passed away, I experienced a lot of depression. God bless Morgan for putting up with me. And he said, I'm in it to win it. But the first year of our marriage was tough because 30 days after my mother passed away on November 28, 2014, on December 28th, literally 30 days later, I married the love of my life. And I didn't know, neither did he know, that I would be that depressed because I thought I was strong. And I still am. I do think I'm strong. But just because you're strong doesn't mean that you're not human or that you're not a spiritual being having a human experience. We were doing a radio show on Philly Speaks the other day, and Tiffany talked about look out for the strong ones. And I was like, ooh, yes, 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 yes. That is something that I wanted to talk about on our platform because sometimes it's the stronger ones that nobody pays attention to. When we think about paying attention to the atmosphere, right? Paying attention to the atmosphere sometimes means being focused on the person that appears as if they have no problems, appears as if they have no issues, appears as if they got everything under the control, and they're trying to hold the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they simply can't because we're not designed that way. And so it's important for all of us to think about when those transitions happen, when we're exiting a family system or any kind of system, or we're entering a system, or when there's a blended family scenario, or when someone dies and we did not expect that was going to happen that way. And we're just kind of left with one question of why. That's a big question for many of us where we don't have the answer to, and we can't even reconcile it. So we're just mad. So there's the anger, there's the depression, there's the bargaining. Then there is, okay, now that I've been angry and depressed and bargaining, situations, then, okay, how do I get back to some kind of norm? And so you can get to a level of acceptance, but it takes a minute to get to that level of acceptance. So those are things that I want to help you guys to understand that it's a process, right? And through pain comes power, but there's the process, which is an ingredient in between that you have to, sort of be patient with yourself around. Now, when we're talking about other kinds of transitions, one of the things, or at least I said I was going to give you 5 things that is really important that we pay attention to, is we've got to pay attention to acceptance, which is healing. But sometimes we're not at the place of acceptance just yet. So if we're not at acceptance, then getting to a place of just tolerance. Can you tolerate? When I used to work in addictions, they called it fake it till you make it. Can you just tolerate this change that's happening, this transition that's happening in a way that allows you to just breathe? I have heard people talk about in the aftermath of a death that happens, that all they want to do is be able to breathe because it feels like they can't catch their breath. They're in such a state of shock. So what I would say is, in the process of before you get to the acceptance, just breathe. Just breathe every day so that you know if you got to put your hand in front to feel your breath, just breathe. And then I would also say, in a transition, you don't want to have this experience alone. You don't want to be in a silo, because sometimes when you're in your own thoughts, that's the most dangerous place that for you to be if you're in a state of depression. So identify somebody that can grow through this transition, some accountability partner, somebody that you know, somebody that you love. It doesn't mean that you won't always be alone. Sometimes you do need to be in your own space. And when you're in your own space, try to journal. At least journaling will allow you to purge the emotions that are on the inside. Because remember I said earlier, the pressure burst pipes? Well, that's what I mean by that. So journaling will help to sort of externalize some of those emotions to help you to maybe get through, grow through the other side. And then again, keep a village connected to you. And then the last thing I would say is have be able to connect with something that you knew brought you joy in the past. Even if you're not feeling it now, it might be a nature walk, it might be gardening, it might be listening to music. But whatever has brought you joy in the past, even if you're not experiencing that joy in the moment, just try to still do it anyway in the midst of that transition. I'm hoping that that's helpful for some of you guys. I want to hear what your thoughts are about it. We strong ones don't always, Janelle said, know how to care for ourselves. Absolutely. And so what I would say, Janelle, about that is that we strong ones, we have to put our oxygen mask on first, right? That is a thing. When you go on the plane and they say put your oxygen mask on first, they do that for a reason, because if the plane goes down, they know that you can't help anybody else if you're not able to help yourself. So to be able to put that oxygen mask on first metaphorically means that you prioritize yourself. Actually learn to ask for help. Tell yourself it is okay to ask for help. It is okay that you don't have it all figured out. It is okay that you're not perfect at this thing. Because guess what? If you're experiencing transition, like a loss, a death, a job loss, if you're experiencing those kinds of transitions, you may not have ever embarked on this particular journey before. So how would you be proficient at it? How would you know what to do? You haven't navigated this landscape before. So being able to find somebody that can support you in that process, and it could be a friend, it could be a spiritual advisor, it could be a therapist. By the way, there's some really, really good therapists out there. Actually, I know one. Her name is Dr. Argie Allen-Wilson. But I'm not the only one out there. There are some other great therapists out there. And I'm happy oftentimes to share resources. We work together in tandem because our goal as clinicians is to help you to get to the right person. If it's me, great. Give me a call. You can always reach me at 215-789-6999. You can email me at Dr. Argie at connectionsmatterllc.com. Join our website, step onto our website, drargieconnects.com, or we've got a lot of content and we're going to be starting doing some blogging regarding these same issues. So go on the YouTube page. There's going to be a lot of content on there, and some of that content I'm sure applies to you. One YouTube page is the Ask Dr. Argie page, and the other one is the Connections Matter TV YouTube page. So check them out if those resonate with you. But again, listen guys, it is okay to ask for help. There is no one, we're all an ex-someone or X something, right? There's no perfect human being. We all struggle with something. That's just a part of the human experience, if you will, and it's a part of humanity. And we need each other. We need each other in order to gain some skills and some resources to help us to move forward in a healthy way. So the healthier us inside allows us to be in healthier relationships. Monica's on. Hey, Monica, it's great seeing you on Saturday. Got to hang out with my girl, my soror. Thanks for joining the show. Elder Troy, Tony Tate is on. Thanks for joining the show. How many of you, I'm going to take a station break for a moment to ask you to share. STLC, I like to say share, tag, like, and comment. This conversation, this courageous conversation is only able to connect if you share the information. Don't hold it all for yourself. If you feel like this is great, share it, not even just with people that are here in Philadelphia, share with other people in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. I'm your global transformationalist, right? My job is to help people to transform their lives, one courageous conversation at a time. Our motto here is helping families to heal one relationship at a time and transforming relationships one courageous conversation at a time for relationships, individuals, corporations, and couples, if you will. And so with that being said, I never got to my story about hey, Herb is on, HU is in the house, Herb, Shana was on a little bit earlier. I never got to, and this is a great transition, to tell you that on Sunday, I thought about transitions because it had been, I don't know if you guys resonate with me, it's almost been 5 years since my mom passed away. And my dad had been asking my sisters and I to clear out some of my mother's things. And I think emotionally, none of us were just ready to do it. And so we just stalled and procrastinated and did a whole bunch of other things that were worthy of what he wanted us to do, but we never got to that. So Sunday, we kind of bit the, got our courage up, if you will. And we all got together, my sisters and I, and began to go through my mother's things and to determine what people might want, like her church hats. I took some of her church hats and we separated some things, and each of us, interestingly enough, took things that resonated with us based on who our mother was to us. And it was so funny because my sister Kelly had some things that made her feel like, they were just very stylish, how my mother was. And I had some of her church dresses that were like really, really feminine. And my sister had some really colorful things. And we realized that like, we're all her and she is all us. And we actually had a really good time doing it, although it was extremely emotional. And so the thing about transition is that it happens whether you're ready or not. It really does. There are multiple transitions that take place, not just death, not just divorce, although those are very difficult, not just job loss. Sometimes the transition is just that we are transitioning from one life cycle stage into the next. We are transitioning from being babies. I take care of my little great niece, JoJo, and I think to myself, I would love to be a baby again and be completely dependent and not have to do anything, but that is never going to happen again. So I have to accept the stage that I'm in right now, which is in my middle life cycle stage, life cycle stage. We have 4 quarters, really 5, right? And one, we've got the first quarter, 0 to 20, and then the second quarter, 21 to 40, and the third quarter, 41 to 60. The fourth quarter, 61 to 80. And if you're 81 or above, you are in overtime. You have successfully won this game of life that we call life, however. And many of us can win at any stage of that game, but guess what? To traverse from one stage to the next, guess what it requires? It requires a different skill set. It requires different tasks. We don't do in our 20s what we did in our preteens. That would not be appropriate because we're supposed to be tracking and developing developmentally, emotionally, intellectually, psychologically, relationally, familially, spiritually, right? And if we're developing in all those areas, then we ought to be adapting to our new norm, our new life cycle stage that then helps us to grow in that particular area. But guess what? Sometimes we don't have the skills, right? Sometimes we need to go to a therapist to help us to think through those particular skills that we don't really have. I'm wondering what life cycle stages you all are struggling with, or if you'll be transparent. We believe here at the Ask Dr. Argie Courageous Conversations Connect series, we want to be transparent. We believe that truth, trust, and transparency, it leads to transformational breakthroughs. And so I will tell you, even my clientele, I have a lot of clientele that are older, the older aging population. Well, guess what's happening with them? They're sometimes not remembering as much. They're dealing with not being able to move and do as many things as they used to. Guess what they're dealing with? They're dealing with a lot of times that the people that they've known and loved are no longer here. I went to my niece's grandmother's funeral, and she died 2 weeks ago, and then her sister died the day after, and she was one of 8. So the only person that was left was, I believe, her brother. And so I can't even imagine, like, you have these 7 siblings and they're all gone. And so you have relationships with each one of them. Same thing happened in my family as well. We've lost 3 of our senior members of our family, including my mother and my Uncle Sam, and then my Aunt May, all within 4 years. That's a huge loss, especially for the siblings that are still here and their families are no longer here in the same way. Tell me if this resonates with you with regards to transition and how you adapt to that transition. Adaptation is real. I had said that, one of those 5 points was acceptance, but before you get to acceptance, sometimes you have to adapt to your new norm, right? You have to know that it's a process. You have to be patient with yourself. You have to understand that everybody won't understand what you're going through. The truth is, when you're going through a transition, whatever that transition is, sometimes, and I'm going to be real transparent with you guys, sometimes people just want you to get over it. They want you to get back to your new norm, whatever that, or your old norm. Get back to who you were. Don't be depressed. Don't be upset. Don't focus on yourself. And especially if you're a caregiver or a rescuer and you're used to taking care of everybody else, don't be a little depressed. And I know that only too well, because a lot of people will want you to just get on with it, right? And the truth is, we can't just get on with it. We're human beings, and when we're experiencing trauma or loss or any kind of transition, it takes a minute for us to adapt to that. Now, if it's 20 years and you still haven't adapted, that could be problematic, because what that means is that you're not living the life that you were designed to live. So I like to say it becomes a both and experience, not an either or experience. So let me unpack that and tell you what I mean about that. I mean, hey, Sheila's on. Thanks for joining the show. Lisa's on. Louise is on. Thanks for joining the show. And Lisa Caldwell's on. What I mean by a both and versus an either or is that the both and is that we get to experience joy and happiness in our lives simultaneously while experiencing pain and sadness, right? Pastor also talked about that song from Earth, Wind, and Fire, Joy and Pain is like sunshine and rain. Babe, did I get that right? Okay. He's my music guy. And so we get to experience both of it. But sometimes what happens is that we're so sad or we're so overwhelmed with the transition that it doesn't feel like we can experience the happiness and the joy, because we're experiencing such pain, such sadness. And that becomes a process by which we have to grow through. Angela Joyner says, helping my aging parents navigate aging. It's new to them and new to me, and at times sad. You're right. You're absolutely right. But God bless you for being able to do that and stand in the gap. Because listen, it's real. When my mom passed away, I was there when she transitioned. I got to hold her in the last hours of her life. And I thought intuitively, wow, what a full cycle have we come to, because you held me when I came into this world, and I'm holding you as you transition this world, right? But watching your parents age, for many of us, is not easy, because these are sometimes, if we've had great parents, our heroes and our sheroes. It's the first man we've ever loved. It's the first woman that was with us the longest, our biggest cheerleaders, and then to get to the point where they're not able to move as quickly, not able to remember things. I just encourage you all, be patient with your parents. We just passed Mother's Day. We're about to embark on Father's Day. Sit with them. I know that you may have a lot of tasks to take care of, but the greatest gift that you can give to them, if they're still here, is to sit with them. Just sit. Just slow down. Take your time. Even if they can't remember everything that they used to remember, even if they're not talking as quickly or swiftly as they once did, be patient. They will appreciate it. And guess what? You will appreciate it too, because when they're no longer here, if the transition of them being older happens in a way that God designs where they're gone and you're still here, you're going to wish that you had the time to spend, to love on them, to hold them, to tell them that you love them, to appreciate them, to tell them that you appreciate all the things that they did for you. That's going to be important for you. And quite frankly, now we have technology. So take videos and pictures so that you can have those memories, as my sisters and I did yesterday. Mark is on. Thanks for joining. Hey, Walt, thanks for joining the show. We got to hang out on Saturday at Kim Reed's birthday party as well. So it was so cool seeing you and catching up with our families are connected through Enon. And of course, we've been friends since we were 12, 13 years old. And so, it's just great. We really laughed about who knew what we were going to be and how great God was going to be to us as we embarked on our professional careers as adults. So it was great chatting with you. Louise is on. Thanks for joining the show, Louise. Amina's on. Thanks for joining the show. James is on. And Angela talks about must learn to navigate new norms. How about that? New norms is a big one when we think about transition. Okay, so today we're talking about transitions that change our lives permanently. Sometimes it's death. Sometimes it's a long-term illness of a loved one, or sometimes it just happens just like that, like those folks that were killed in Virginia Beach by a senseless shooting, right? Sometimes it happens quickly due to a natural disaster where it just, a person's life is taken and you're wondering what just happened? It's a whirlwind and you're shocked. Other times it's a divorce, right? And you didn't see it coming because people sometimes, unfortunately, they have problems and they are not able to assess the issue and address the issue. And so subsequently, the problem deals with them and they never deal with the problem. There's a couple of good books out there. There's The New Rules of Marriage by Terrence Real that helps you to deal with that. There's Fighting for Your Marriage, and there's also Fighting for Your African American Marriage. That's a really good book by Howard Markman. And then there's also The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Those are all really good books that I recommend for people, couples, families, to deal with their relationships so that you don't have to get to a place where you get blindsided because you haven't really dealt with the issues that are taking place. And by the way, guys, marriage is hard and it's work. Don't ever let anybody tell you that it's not work. It's valuable. I believe in the institution of marriage. It's a great thing. I married the love of my life. He's sitting right over here on the other side of the office, and we're rocking it out together as entrepreneurs, but it's still work, right? And so don't believe the hype when you embark on a journey that is important as the Institute of Marriage. Then that means that you have to put the work in. You never go to a job and say, I'm lazy, I'm not a team player, I don't work well with others, I'm not innovative, I don't really, care, don't really give a crap, and then expect them to hire you and then pay you 6 figures, right? But then we'll go into relationships and not want to put the work in. You got to put the work in. And it's important that you show your partner, and we'll talk a little bit about that, as we talk when we do another episode, another show on transition. I'll have some really good tools for you all to communicate effectively. But for right now, we're sort of talking about when we're blindsided and the aftermath of a transition such as death or divorce or job loss. And what do you do? One of the things is you get patient with yourself. One of the things that you do is you recognize it's a process. One of the things is that you have to adapt to this new norm or this change, and it's going to be hard. So you need to brace yourself and pace yourself. Did I say? I want to say that again. You need to brace yourself like you're about to be on a roller coaster ride, right? And then you need to pace yourself, because it's in the pacing of yourself that you give yourself grace to grow through the process. It is in the pacing yourself that you give yourself grace to grow through the process. If you try to get through it quickly, you find yourself that all those emotions and those feelings, they just stay dormant. And guess what? They're going to bubble up as soon as you get triggered by something or someone, all right, or some event. They will bubble up. It's not like they're going anywhere. So you might as well deal with it before it deals with you. And then, of course, if you do that, then you get to a place where you're adapting to your new norm, you're adapting to this change, and then you can get to the place of acceptance and moving on. But not moving on like you forgot the past, like it never happened. You know, sometimes people think that moving on means that they want to erase the past. You don't have to do that. You know, I have a person who just had a partner pass away, and they were like, "What do I do? What does this mean that I'm not married anymore? What does this all mean?" And I was like, "You don't have to figure it out right now. You've never been here before." So, and what I tell my clients all the time is, have someone that you trust be able to grow you through and walk you through this process, because it's a painful process, and simultaneously it's also a powerful process. And you can come out of the other side healed and whole. You can. But in order to come out of the other side healed and whole, there's going to be a whole lot of things that you may have to do in that process. And perhaps persons like a therapist, like a spiritual advisor, like a friend that can hold you in the midst of the storm, right? Because it is a storm. And that storm can, bruise you up a little bit. Quite frankly, there can be some twists and turns and some trials and tribulations before you grow through to the other side. And it's going to take some time. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Whenever you're going through entering a storm, exiting, or in the middle of it, it's going to take some time for you to get to a place where you feel better. Do not give up. Do not give up. Love, light, truth, and accountability, those things together collectively leads to hope and freedom. And it is when people give up, that is when they have no hope. Then they get to a place of despair and they are not free. And when you're not free, then quite frankly, there's all kinds of thoughts that are swirling around in our heads that cause us to do hurtful and harmful things. Robin Murphy's on. Thanks for joining the show, Robin. Kenneth is on. Nakia's on. Thanks for joining the show, guys. Roy, Kawanda is on. Janelle said, grace, yes. I heard a preacher say grace develops you the rest of your life. And it's a process. Absolutely. And sometimes we have to have the grace for ourselves. I really feel like there are times when we are too harsh on ourselves, especially when you're going through a particular transition, because the world will tell you, get over it, get on with it. Get over it, get on with it, get back to work, snap, snap, chop, chop, right? Get back. You get what? What do you get? When you have a baby, you're birthing a baby into the world, they give you 3 months to take care of a human, right? When you lose the greatest person in your life, a partner, a parent, a child, you could lose them through death or go through a divorce. And guess what? They don't even give you that much. They might give you some like 3 days. If you get family leave, medical leave, you get a little bit more time. And meanwhile, people are probably texting you trying to find out if you can do some work on the side. And so the culture that we live in doesn't give a lot of room for the grace, right? And the peace that ultimately surpasses all understanding that leads us to a place of joy. It just doesn't. So here's the deal, guys. Since we live in a culture that doesn't give us room for that grace, we have to harness it. We have to internalize it. We have to protect it, right? Lisa Nichols says, we need to act like we have nothing to prove, nothing to defend, and nothing to protect. And if you do those things with yourself, right, then that helps you to be centered. And if you are still having difficulty, you're having anxiety and panic attacks, and sometimes you're just uncomfortable with this transition that you're in, I encourage you, therapy is not a good thing, not a bad thing. I am not going to rest, quite frankly, until I believe that everyone understands that therapy is available to all of us and that it's a good thing. Give me some thumbs up, some smiley faces, or some hearts if that works for you. Share this show with others. It's not just a monologue, it's a dialogue for all of us. And we, especially people of color, we haven't always gotten the memo that we can go talk to somebody that is confidential, somebody that creates a safe space, somebody that helps us through sometimes the most darkest and most difficult moments of our lives. Auburn is on. Hey, Auburn. Roger's on. Thanks for joining the show. Roger's used to do all of my security, and very, very good friends. And I know he knows about this because he lost his mother not too long ago. And so we, in case you all just hopped on, we started a little late. We're going to do that in the summertime because it's lighter out. So we'll typically start somewhere between 8 and 8:30. So that means we'll go a little bit longer. But if you all feel like this is a good conversation for you, remember, we do WIOW, Work It Out Wednesdays, right? And we want you on Testimonial Tuesdays to send your testimony and then to ask specific questions around transition. Tell me what transitions you're dealing with. If I haven't mentioned some specific transitions, like Janelle helped us to think about those veterans that are re-entering their family systems, or those veterans, those people in the military that protect us, that make us safe, that allow myself and all of you to be on this platform tonight and not worry so much. Those are our veterans, our military people, and we need to thank them because they not only put their lives on the line, but their families are sacrificing all of what they need because their loved one is not with them. So those are people that are transitioning as well, moving into a storm, exiting the storm, coming back home, not the way that they were before, sometimes experiencing, in many cases, post-traumatic stress disorder. And quite frankly, we're not really fully prepared in the way that we should as a country to wrap our arms around them, make sure that they have health care, make sure that they have therapeutic care, mental health care, make sure that they, quite frankly, have a place to live and a job to go on. We need to do a better job when it comes to our veterans. And of course, there are many other, give me some, yes, hand, thumbs up and smiley faces and all that. It's really, really important, guys, that we wrap ourselves around each other, affirm each other, whatever we're going through. Maybe have a random act of kindness for someone, especially our seniors, right? Call your senior people, the people that you know, are in your family, people that are not in your family, wrap your arms around them, let them know that you're still around, because it is a lonely place sometimes to get older and know that many people that you love are passing away or not what they used to be. It's a lonely place to